This is a presentation from the 2013 Cannabis World Summit. Please visit www.cannabisworldsummit.com for more great cannabis information, which is available to you completely for free. This information is being made available to you in part thanks to our sponsors. Please visit their websites to learn more about their excellent products and services. The following presentation is for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Leaves of Hope Productions, Inc. Please note that regardless of any statements expressed or implied in the following presentation, that we do not condone you breaking any laws. We are not providing any legal, medical, or financial advice of any kind. No comments about cannabis being a cure for any medical use, expressed or implied, is to be taken as a claim or guarantee. None of the statements have been verified by the FDA of the United States, Health Canada, or the governing organizations of your particular country. And again, this information is being provided for informational purposes only, and the participants exercise their freedom of speech discussing what they believe to be true. We do not guarantee the accuracy of any information provided. It is your responsibility to evaluate the information before you choose to make any use of it. Please consult with a doctor knowledgeable about cannabis prior to using cannabis, and or prior to discontinuing any medications you may be currently using. Please check with the laws of your country and region to determine whether you are legally permitted to use and or grow cannabis prior to any involvement with cannabis yourself. Even though we believe that cannabis ought to be legalized, we do not condone you violating any laws. Please review the legal disclaimers on the Cannabis World Summit website and only proceed to enjoy this presentation if you agree with all legal disclaimers, agree to hold the company, Leaves of Hope Productions, Inc., and the presenters harmless and are of legal age in your region. Thanks to Kevin MacLeod and Incompetech.com for the music used in this introduction.
Ladies and gentlemen, today I have a very special guest that I'd like to introduce to you. But before I introduce our next speaker, I would like to just set the stage properly just to help you to understand the importance and the significance of the talk that we're about to enjoy. Now, there are, of course, a number of speakers that have been interviewed for the summit, and they're all fabulous. They all have lots of great information, and I definitely would recommend that you take the time to listen to all the interviews so that you can get to learn a few interesting points about the topics that they're discussing. But there are two particular interviews for the summit that I think stand head and shoulders above the rest in the sense of their importance for our listeners. And, of course, one of them is Rick Simpson, which, of course, he has contributed a phenomenal amount to the cannabis movement with all his work towards promoting cannabis. But also, of course, we understand that he brought a lot of information that he shared about how to use cannabis medicinally, particularly, of course, for curing cancer. And, of course, he's been interviewed for the summit, and I definitely would recommend that you take the time to listen to the interview with him. It's a long interview, but of course, if you or anybody in your family ever get cancer or any of the illnesses that cannabis can help, you definitely want to have the information that he has to offer. However, he, of course, brings the information about healing the people. But our next guest brings another very important aspect to the whole cannabis understandings of healing the planet. Now, of course, the different people would have different opinions as to what's more important, whether it be healing the people or healing the planet. However, I'll just say that they're both very, very important, and this speaker is going to share a lot of information that will help you all to realize why I've been actually saying that legalizing cannabis may actually be one of the most important, if not the most important, political topic that, of course, we need to legalize cannabis immediately because of the ramifications on so many diverse political issues. And so, of course, before I introduce our speaker, I just want to also put a shout-out in gratitude to Amanda Hitt, who on Twitter is a Culture Catalyst. Both of those words are started with a K, who introduced suggested this next speaker to me, and it was instrumental in making sure that we interview this speaker in order to share this information with all of you, because he's providing such fantastic information about the healing of the planet. Our next speaker is Paul Stanford. He's the president of THC Medical Clinics and Presto Quality Care. He's also the president of Hemp and Cannabis Foundation. He's also the president of Campaign for Restoration and the Regulation of Hemp, amongst many other things. He has his own TV show. He's got hemp.org. And, of course, I would say that from all these credentials, he definitely knows a thing or two about hemp and how to use it for fuel, fiber, food, and, of course, the healing of the nations. So, Paul, thank you so very much for taking the time to speak with us and sharing your wisdom with all of us listening today, with the world, and we desperately need this information to understand. Thank you for taking this time to do the call with us today.
Well, you're very welcome, Bobby. I'm always happy to talk about the most productive plant on the planet.
Well, thank you so very much for sharing about it. So before we get talking about the wonderful virtues of this absolutely astounding plant, can you tell us, first of all, how did you come to discover hemp and marijuana? Like, what was your journey? How did you come to this plant in the first place?
Well, as a kid growing up in Texas, I first tried marijuana back when I was just 11. And became very interested in it, and at that time you could get honest books in the libraries about marijuana, and there were a few of them out there, like the Marijuana Papers, a compilation edited by this guy Larry Sloman, and several others, including Ernest Abel's Marijuana, the First 12,000 Years. And so I found that a lot of political movements were stopped because people were persecuted because of the use of marijuana. It seemed to be tied to a lot of progressive issues. Then in the early 1980s, this fellow named Jack Hare started publicizing the information. I first read a paper by him in a Yippie magazine, the Yippies that Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin had organized, and they had put out a newspaper, and it had an article in it by this fellow Jack Hare. And I met him in Los Angeles, and then he moved up to the same town I lived in Portland, Oregon, in late 1984. And so at that point, he was researching this, and I helped research information through local libraries, and found a compilation of all the papers of Washington and Jefferson, and looked in the index in this 25-volume set that they each had individually, and looked up Indian hemp and found a lot of references that weren't really known to the marijuana movement. For instance, that Thomas Jefferson had invented a device to process hemp fiber. George Washington grew hemp for about 45 years. He received a package of hashish from a doctor in London that he called quite a curiosity, one that he'd make more time for, just at the wrapping up of a long and laborious session of Congress. So I provided some of this information for Jack Hare's book, and this other fellow, Jack Hare, put out a book called The Emperor Wears No Clothes. And I helped him with the first edition in 1985, and about 5 years later, this fellow Chris Conrad put out a book, Hemp Lifeline to the Future. And I helped him on that as well. But in the Jack Hare and I were working on marijuana legalization and initiative projects in California and Oregon to completely legalize marijuana. And so the book was a catalyst for that, and Jack went and sold it on a national basis and continued to develop it. He passed away a couple of years ago, back in 2009, but or actually 2010, but he had revised that book many times. Did you say something there, Bobby?
No, I was just saying 10 when you were...
2010.
Yes.
Yeah. It was actually April 15th, 2010, but he had a stroke, or a secondary stroke, in October or September of 2009. But anyway, so in working on these initiative issues, I found that China had the world's largest industrial hemp crop. So I started studying Chinese, and I went to school in China for 2 years in 1988.
Oh, really?
All my classes were canceled in 1989, but I went back in 1990. And I started importing hemp paper and hemp fabric. And I did that as a business from 1989 through 1997. At that point, I had spent too much on offices and payroll and not enough on inventory, so I went out of business. But in 1996, I started producing a television show and hosting a television show called Cannabis Common Sense. And we're still producing that on a weekly basis. We're up to about 670 shows to date. And
fantastic. Congratulations.
Yeah, and so it's out on the internet. And in doing that show, I invited a lawyer and a doctor on to co-host the show with me. The lawyer's name was Paul Loney, and I still work closely with him. And the doctor's name was Dr. Philip Levesque. I still work with him. He just, in fact, turned 90 years old. But back in 1998, he was just 70-something. And so he came on the show, and when Oregon passed the medical marijuana bill, and it went into effect in 1999, patients started showing up at our show to get licensed by our doctor. And so pretty soon that turned into a business. And I helped organize around first the state of Oregon, and then in 2003 we opened in Washington, 2004 in Hawaii, 2005 in Colorado, and now we're located in 10 different states. And I am in the Northeast right now preparing to open in New England, in Massachusetts, Maine, and Rhode Island. So what we do is we have doctors who help patients get their medical marijuana permits. So in states that allow doctors to recommend medical marijuana, either their doctor won't do it, or they're afraid to ask their doctor. They don't want it for one reason or another in their permanent medical records, or whatever reason. Then we provide a confidential and reliable way for them to get a doctor's recommendation for their state's medical marijuana permit. And so to date, we've helped about 160,000 people all across the United States get their medical marijuana recommendation and permit. In several states, the various state agencies issue it. In most states, it's the health department. Hawaii, it's the Narcotics Enforcement Police. And in California and Washington State, just the doctor's recommendation on prescription paper is good enough, and there's no state agency that issues the permits.
Oh, really?
So,
okay. Which state was that again?
In Washington and California. There are a couple of the first two states to allow medical marijuana authorizations. And so the doctor's recommendation is the only. Once they've got that from the doctor, written recommendation, then they don't have to turn in anything to the state. But in most states, such as Oregon and Maine, where I'm at right now, Massachusetts, which just passed the law here in November of 2012, in those states you have to apply to the Department of Health in that state.
I see, okay. So just out of curiosity, can you mention the website for listeners? Those of you who are in the United States who, of course, live in one of the states that medical marijuana is permissible, perhaps if you haven't been licensed already or gotten your permits or whatever is required in your particular state, you can contact Paul's organizations to help you out with that. So, Paul, what would be a website that people can go to in order to initiate that process in the States?
Well, the easiest one is hemp.org. So that is the easiest one. That's a portal to all of our sites, including the political activity we've been working on still to legalize marijuana. You know, they just passed that in Colorado and Washington, and we put it on the ballot in Oregon, but we ended with just 46.9% of the vote. We fell 3.1% shy. about 100,000 votes shy of winning the legal marijuana in Oregon as well in the last election cycle. But the website is hemp.org.
Well, I know that of course, was unfortunate that you didn't get quite enough votes, but nonetheless, that was still pretty close. And for what it's worth,
yeah,
looking at the
we're
numbers,
moving in the legislature in Oregon now, and if we don't get it through the legislature, we'll put it back on the ballot for 2014. So that's just a year and a half away.
And so, of course, I'm sure there's continuing efforts to educate the people and let them know why it's in their best interest to, of course, vote yes. And hopefully this time around, especially after seeing what happened in Colorado, Washington, and, of course, other states that are sort of following behind as well, perhaps the next time around you'll get the extra 100 and some odd thousand votes.
No, I'm pretty confident that yes, we will. And if we'd had more financial backing in the last campaign, we would have perhaps won. But it looks like the major funders, George Soros and Peter Lewis, the billionaires who had helped pass it in Colorado and Washington, are going to help us this next time around. But, one of the things that really excites me about marijuana legalization that you brought up that's often overlooked is the aspect of hemp. And, there's a lot of confusion about hemp and marijuana, but that confusion is understandable because there's been a lot of varying information, about hemp and marijuana. In fact, just the law here in the United States says that hemp is the stems and sterile seeds of the marijuana plant, and the drug marijuana is the leaves, flowers, and viable seeds. And so that's both from the same plant, Cannabis sativa. And a lot of people think that it's a completely different plant. It's a different species. But in fact, it's really the cannabis species. Both Cannabis sativa produces marijuana and hemp fiber, hemp fuel, hemp food. And the dichotomy is that there are different varieties. Same as, Canis familiaris, the dog, the common dog, has everything from a Chihuahua or a Dachshund up to a German Shepherd or an Irish Wolfhound. There's a lot of genetic variation over the eons that humans have been breeding these species for various purposes. And so if you look back during World War II, in fact, the United States government had prohibited marijuana in the 1930s based on what was a racist misinformation campaign. Even though hemp is the oldest crop, it's been cultivated for over 12,000 years, and perhaps as much as 30,000 years ago, according to some research that's been publicized by this Canadian researcher, Chris Bennett, who writes about the religious use of marijuana. But hemp is the oldest cultivated crop and could well have been the very first crop purposely cultivated by humans over 12,000 years ago. All archaeologists agree it's in the first handful of crops, so there's some debate about what could be the first. Most of the evidence points to Cannabis sativa as being cultivated for food and fiber and medicine, and as a social drug. And so then the plant produces more fuel in terms of the seed oil and ethanol from its biomass conversion. It produces about 300 to 350 gallons of oil per acre.
That's astounding when you think about it. Of course, I'd like for you also to contrast that with other seed oil crops as well. Like how much? I remember you were talking.
Yeah, canola, or rapeseed, sunflower seeds, and soybeans each produce about 100 to 120 gallons of oil.
So this is approximately three times more biofuel.
More.
And what's the byproduct? I'm sorry for interrupting. Of course, you had a flow there. Perhaps you might want to finish that.
Well, the byproduct of producing that 300 gallons is you start out with about 8,000 to 8,500 pounds of seeds per acre. And this is according to a study out of the University of Illinois at Urbana that was published in the Midland Naturalist, a publication out of Notre Dame University back in 1975. And it studied feral or wild hemp in east central Illinois. And so a lot of the numbers you see from industrial hemp production are of a dwarf variety, this low THC hemp. What they've done to get this low THC hemp is they've bred out the flowers, because by breeding out the flowers, they breed out the THC. But conversely, they breed out the seeds. So these low THC varieties only produce about 600 pounds of seed per acre on average, where feral wild hemp here in the United States produces 15 to 20 times more than that, about 8,000, 8,500 pounds
really?
of seed per acre.
May I just ask you a quick question then, Paul?
Sure.
So, of course, you just alluded to the fact that the feral hemp, of course, produces more seeds, more flowers. What would be the THC levels of feral hemp? And because, of course, I understand that
anywhere from 2 to 4% on average.
Okay, because, of course,
it's still
for example,
comparatively low THC content, but it's way above the amount allowed by law in Canada and Europe. You know, in Canada and Europe, they're allowed to grow this dwarf hemp, which is a patented variety of cannabis that's genetically modified by a French company, and it's not a stable cultivar. It's not a stable variety. Its offspring will produce 1% THC, which is 3 times more than the 0.3% that's allowed by law in Canada and Europe. So you have to keep going back to the French company to buy those seeds. Of course, here in the United States, the only way you could import those seeds would be with a permit from the DEA. The Drug Enforcement Administration has not given out any permits to import low THC hemp strains, and they've blocked the ability to cultivate hemp for fuel, fiber, and food here in the United States based on the marijuana law. But again, you go back to World War II, and the federal government issued permits to allow hemp cultivation for fiber, and they called them marijuana permits. So the permits that the federal government gave out for hemp were called marijuana permits. But a lot of people say that hemp and marijuana are not the same plant. But I'm here to tell you that they really are the same plant. They're just different varieties. And
so essentially, just metaphorically, of course, as you were mentioning, looking at dogs, they've been bred to have different characteristics. So what we're talking about is hemp and marijuana, same exact plant, just one has the characteristics of being higher in the psychoactive THC levels, and the other one is much significantly lower. But everything else is there, so you can still use the fiber, you can still eat the seeds, you can of course press them for oil, and so all the other benefits are there. So just the psychoactive component, the medicine perhaps, or the recreational aspects of it, that's the only thing that's been bred out of it. So just like tomatoes and other agricultural crops, of course there's different varieties, so just a variety of cannabis sativa, as you mentioned. They're both exactly the same otherwise.
Exactly. And so you're asking about the production levels a while ago, and of course we said 1 acre of hemp produces about 300 gallons of vegetable oil. That oil is very nutritious, but it also can run any diesel engine, and anything you can do with petroleum, you can do with hemp seed oil. But you start with 8,000 pounds of seeds, and you press it, and you get 300 gallons of oil, and what's left over is 6,000 pounds of high-protein hemp seed meal. And so that hemp seed meal is the most nutritious vegetable protein or protein available for us for human consumption. It has the 8 amino acids that humans need for nutrition in just the right balance for human nutrition. And it has the essential fatty acids, the omega-6, 3, and 9. Again, quite surprisingly, or perhaps not, given that we've cultivated it for over 12,000 years, but in just the right proportion for humans' optimal nutrition needs. So now, in addition to the seeds, which you get the oil and the protein from, that same acre will produce the stems for the plant. And those stems will produce about 25 to 30 tons of hemp hurd fiber. Hemp hurd fiber is the inner woody pith, or the wood inside the stalk. And that hurd fiber can be used to make paper and building materials. In fact, according to USDA Bulletin 404, the hemp hurd material, which had previously been a waste product from producing the outer bark of the hemp stalk. The outer bark of the hemp stalk is the bast fiber, and that's been used to make canvas, rope, lace, linen, and paper for back to prehistoric times. But
and the superior fiber as well, like contrasted to, for example, cotton. This
exactly. It doesn't need any pesticides at all. But the hurd fiber, according to USDA Bulletin 404, which came out in 1916, it said that it produces over 4 times more paper than the most productive tree species. So you get from that same acre, again, 300 gallons of oil, 6,000 pounds of high-protein hemp seed meal, 25 to 30 tons of hemp hurd fiber for paper and building materials, and then 6 to 10 tons of hemp bast fiber for the canvas, rope, lace, and linen. That doesn't count the leaves that can go back into the soil to rejuvenate the soil, or can be used for biomass production, or juiced as a food, just like wheatgrass could be juiced.
Mm-hmm. Now, just of course, you've opened up a number of topics. Of course, there's a number of questions that I can ask from this. But first of all, I think it's worth pointing out from an agricultural perspective, what you've just discussed here is the fact that this crop has multiple purposes. Most farmers, when they grow a crop, for example, canola or soybean, they're usually growing it for one particular product. They're gathering the seed, and everything else is pretty much a waste. Whereas here, they're growing a crop. Of course, there's the seeds, so that of course you can have the oil. You can also have the nutritious, the high protein foods. You have the inner stalks, the outer stalks for different types of fiber and industrial purposes from both of those. And of course you also have the leaves that can be juiced. I'm sure can also be used for biomass, for ethanol and other uses. So, and of course going back into the ground to replenish the soils as well, so that of course you're not depleting the farmer's soils. And of course all of this
because the hemp taproot goes down so deep, it draws up subsoil nutrients, and when those leaves go back into the soil, they're making them available for future crop rotation.
And so you don't need to, of course, be using artificial fertilizers and pesticides for that matter as well.
That's right. It grows so densely that nothing can grow in its canopy underneath. It grows faster than any other plant. It'll grow 10 to 25 feet tall, depending on the conditions and the varieties.
Right. And that's just absolutely astounding. So from a farmer's perspective, would this be a no-brainer in the sense that there's so many markets? If they were, of course, legally allowed to grow this as a crop, would this not be a tremendous advantage for farmers to be able to grow this?
It certainly is a tremendous advantage. And in the countries that allow its production, which basically we're down to just Russia and China, they use it for all its various purposes. But in fact, if you go back to China prehistorically, its name, they called their country the land of hemp and mulberry. With the Manchurian takeover of China in 1400 AD, according to our time scale, they changed the name of the country to the Middle Country, or Zhongguo. But before back from the origin of Han Chinese along the Yellow River or Wanghe River, they call their country the land of hemp and mulberry, and they call the United States the beautiful country. So, but it goes back prehistorically. It's the oldest and most productive crop sown and grown by people. So it's really a travesty, I think, to take the oldest and most productive crop and to prohibit it And it's really all about money and power and the continued centralization of economic and political control. You know, the petrochemical industry created the whole marijuana myth. It's what a friend of mine who passed away a couple of years ago called the petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate, elite, fascist ruling class. This marijuana myth was a conspiracy so that they could develop petroleum products, which are capital intensive, and keep the energy industry, the world's largest industry, out of the hands of the farmer. And that's what they've done, and that's the whole reason behind marijuana prohibition. It sounds kind of crazy to some people when you tell them, first of all, how useful marijuana is as a medicine, but then when you talk about how it's basically earth medicine too, that can heal our planet, it's a phenomenal thing to wrap your mind around. It takes a little while to get all this information down.
Well, based on what you've just said, of course, you understand now why at the start of the call I emphasized, of course, the importance of Rick Simpson's conversation as well as yours, because the two of you really are focusing on two really mind-boggling aspects of cannabis. Of course, when people realize that this devil weed is actually angel weed in terms of curing their ailments and taking care of their health, and then, of course, health benefits also from just the oils and the food as well, forgetting about the cannabinoids. But then, of course, the environmental aspects. There's just so much here. But and of course, there's a number of topics that I'd like to go down. But let me ask you this: of course, you briefly alluded to the fact that there's been the prohibition has been started by the oil companies, and of course, there's other organizations that have been, of course, benefiting from the prohibition. But of course, today it is becoming much more common knowledge that, of course, all of this prohibition is absolute bunk and nonsense. And, of course, we know the facts, and the truth is that cannabis should be legalized for numerous reasons. However, despite all of these realizations that it should be legalized, nonetheless, the prohibition is still in place. And I would speculate that it's because there's still financial interest that the prohibition be maintained. Who is benefiting from the prohibition today, and why might they be? What are your thoughts on why the prohibition is still being enforced? Because obviously it's corporate interests, but who's benefiting from it, and what? In what respect?
Well, you know, there are a lot of different interests and organizations that benefit from it. You know, the national security state uses black market dollars to fund their black operations. They take the money from selling drugs here in the United States and use it to fund those covert wars that the CIA and national security interests have been putting over ever since going back generations, really. But it's just as I said a moment ago, the petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate, elite, fascist ruling class. It's these corporations that don't want to compete with hemp oil because our farmers can produce a better crop and a better product. They want to sell us their petroleum. And as long as they do, it takes billions of dollars now to drill for oil and hundreds of billions of dollars to refine oil into plastic and fuel and all the different things. And it's a highly toxic process. Mm-hmm. I've often said that if you go to the Prince William Sound up in Alaska, where the Exxon Valdez dumped a super tanker load of petroleum into the harbor, and it poisoned the environment for 30 years now, and will be toxic for some period of time in the future. If that had been hemp seed oil, it would have enriched the environment. The birds would have had a food. The wildlife would have flourished. It's just all these toxic byproducts that come from these fossil fuels brewing deep in the earth for millennia, and it's really an interest. The financial interests of these capital-intensive industries And because they're capital intensive and most of us can't compete, they don't want farmers to be able to compete with a $2,000 seed press. They'd rather monopolize the fuel industry rather than see that wealth decentralized. They can centralize it into fewer and fewer hands. And that's what we've seen happen in ever since cannabis was prohibited about 80 years ago.
Now, let me just ask you, Paul, regarding the hemp for fuel, because, of course, with a number of other seed crops and other fuel types of crops, for example, corn, soybean, and so on and so forth, some people have been, of course, arguing that it takes more input energy in order to get the energy out. So that there's a negative net.
And that might be true with corn ethanol, but not with hemp seed. With hemp seed, you just press the seeds, and you have the oil. And you can take that oil without any conversion whatsoever and pour it into any diesel engine and turn the key. It's not like you have to take the corn, squeeze the juice, brew alcohol, and all of that process. It's simply a matter of cold pressing the seeds. And
so literally a farmer who has diesel tractors and so on and so forth could literally just grow, for example, a couple of acres of hemp and then, of course, power all of his farm equipment using
That's right.
his own.
And if he grew more, he could power everybody else's too.
Now, let's, of course, the implications, of course, for fuel, and, of course, some people, like Rick Simpson, talks a lot that we ought to be a hemp-based nation, our industrial, rather than being fossil fuel-based. And, of course, there's other implications, of course, with the carbon dioxide we're spewing into the atmosphere that's been, of course, from below ground. Of course, when you're using hemp, it's, of course, carbon neutral, and there's all these other benefits that we can also discuss as well. But realistically, Paul, is hemp a solution that we can realistically farm in sufficient quantities and press to have fuel independence so that we are literally no longer dependent upon fossil fuels? Can we realistically utilize hemp if it were completely legalized and encouraged to be farmed? Can we become a hemp-based nation?
We certainly can. And it will decentralize wealth and just change our whole economic system. And I think it would cause a huge economic boom. And it would wipe out pollution. It would stop deforestation. It would resolve a lot of economic and social justice issues. It really is, as you pointed out, a solution to a broad variety of problems. And if we could remove the artificial economic barriers imposed by marijuana prohibition and allow farmers to grow the hemp that produces the most seeds and most seed oil and most seed protein and the best fiber without regard to its THC content, without the artificial economic barriers that those entail, it could be the solution for all of these different problems. And it's really the oldest crop, the most productive crop, and the crop that can save our planet. I truly believe that.
I truly believe that as well, and I'm glad to hear that you're saying this as well because, of course, who you are, you have definitely a lot of credibility. And I think, again, it comes right back to the start of the call. I say people need to listen to what you're saying because what you're saying is true, and, of course, you're providing a viable solution to an unbelievable number of world problems, political problems that's being faced in America, Canada, all around the world, and these are things that we really need to be waking up to. But, of course, you just mentioned a few moments ago the topic of deforestation, and, of course, I remember the first time I went to the West Coast and I actually got to see some clear-cut forests. I actually did cry when I first saw it because I was just horrified from what I saw. But I've heard people talk about this, and I just want to get your opinion on this, if this is actually a viable solution. Of course, when you clear-cut a forest, it takes decades in order for those trees to grow back, let alone the wildlife that's been devastated as well. But just thinking about it as a crop, it takes decades for trees to grow back. However, couldn't someone, for example, with a helicopter just go and just where the land's already been deforested, like already been clear-cut, just sowing the seeds and having an annual harvest, could that potentially, of course, we can use hemp stock and the fiber for everything that we cut down the trees for of course, paper, for building materials. We can build houses. Hempcrete. There's just so many versatile uses for this, and of course, and in many respects, the hemp is superior to the tree fiber. But is it viable that we can literally stop cutting down trees and be going to hemp for all of our needs, or most of our needs, because perhaps you can't get exotic furniture out of hemp. Well, maybe you can, but the point of the matter is, of course, can we realistically stop clear-cutting forests and perhaps using the land that's already been clear-cut to harvest more hemp? Is that a possible solution?
Yeah, we definitely could wipe out deforestation by using hemp paper immediately. And hemp paper is acid-free, so it's archival. They use sulfuric acid to break wood fiber down into paper. Hemp paper doesn't need to be made with acid. It can be you can use quicklime or powdered limestone, and it can be produced in an alkaline process that doesn't produce any toxic byproducts. When they whiten wood fiber with with chlorine and bleach, it creates dioxins and a lot of other toxic, carcinogenic toxic compounds. And when you make hemp with paper with hemp and use quicklime, it doesn't produce any toxic byproducts. And it's archival quality. It'll last hundreds of years, where wood-based papers, you're lucky if it will last 100 years. So we can make all of our building materials out of hemp. In fact, there are studies at Washington State University's Wood Sciences Lab in Pullman, Washington, back in the 1990s that showed that hemp fiberboard is stronger than steel. It's the strongest fiberboard that's ever been tested by that Wood Sciences Lab. And so, and there are several commercial varieties available today, but they're using, this dwarf hemp that's much less productive. Produces about half as much fiber and 1/15 to 1/20th as much seed as the wild hemp here in the United States.
Now, perhaps just to touch back onto that subject. So, of course, the reason why a lot of these farmers are using this dwarf hemp, which is inferior, as you're definitely implying here, is because, of course, they've bred the THC to be ultra low.
Yeah, they bred out the THC, which meant they bred out the flowers.
So they bred out the flowers. But let me ask you this, just point-blank question. Of course, obviously, they must be doing this because there's something wrong and dangerous with THC. Why are they doing it? Aside from it's legal, or illegal, I should say, I'm being a little bit sarcastic
you go back initially, and they said that marijuana is a deadly new drug. Now, this is back, 80 to 100 years ago. And they said that this is a deadly new drug that causes people to go crazy and kill their family and friends. Well, nothing could be farther from the truth about marijuana. It makes people relaxed and calm and feel happy in a sense of well-being generally. And it doesn't make most of its users violent. But the way they criminalized it is they said it caused people to go crazy and kill their family and friends. If they had tried to say, we need to make hemp illegal, everyone would have laughed at them because everybody knew what hemp was. They couldn't have made hemp illegal. If they'd said, hey, it's cannabis sativa, well, all the pharmacists and the pharmaceutical companies would have stopped them. But they said it was marijuana. They used this racist term. It comes from a Mexican Revolutionary War song that was used by Pancho Villa's armies, and we know it as La Cucaracha. Bugs Bunny sang it in cartoons when I was a kid. But in that, they say that the cockroach smokes marijuana and falls down. And basically, the Mexican revolutionaries used marijuana, and they nationalized the petrochemical industry. When Pancho Villa's revolution took hold in 1911 in Mexico. They nationalized the petrochemical industry, and I can tell you the Texas oil producers didn't like that. And so the first marijuana laws appeared in 1914 and 1916 in Texas to stop that competition from the natural cycle, basically. It's what a friend of mine, Gatewood Galbraith, called the synthetic cycle versus the natural cycle. They want us to use these petrochemical synthetic products that are toxic instead of these natural organic products that are not toxic. And it's all because it takes untold seas of money to produce the toxic synthetic products, and it's relatively cheap to produce the non-toxic natural products. And so we've got to turn back this tide of the synthetic subversion of the natural cycle and restore hemp to its rightful place in our economy. When we do, we'll reorganize our economic system and help save the remnants of what's left of the biosphere that we need to bequeath to future generations, the plants and animals that are on this planet that we inherited, that we need to pass on for the future.
Absolutely, it's absolutely atrocious to think what's happening. Our grandchildren and our great grandchildren, the world that they're going to be living in. And of course, not getting into the science of what scientists are talking about, but for example, most scientists now agree that in just about another 18 years, by the year 2030, the Arctic will actually be ice-free in the summer. And of course, there's
and so we're taking petroleum carbon deposits out of the earth and toxifying the landscape and cutting down the trees to get to the oil and using those in a non-sustainable way, and hemp is the solution for all of these different products.
And of course, we can create
plastics
with it.
It's just a matter of us educating people and working to change these laws on a global level.
And so, now, of course, it could be easily said that if these crazy laws were never put in place, we would obviously be living in, maybe not necessarily utopia, but definitely a much better version of Earth than it is today, much cleaner, less polluted, and of course, utilizing hemp, there's just so many astounding benefits. But is it realistic, Paul, that we could turn around these trends by embracing hemp? We keep on saying that hemp could save the planet. Is it realistic, what people are saying, if we were to fully embrace the capabilities of hemp and turn around utilizing hemp to replace fossil fuels for most of our uses, not just for fueling, but of course making plastics and so many other products as well, which can easily be done with hemp, could we still save the planet from the direction that we're going in if we were to just do a dramatic 180 in the U.S. And of course, the U.S. leads the rest of the world once the U.S. legalizes hemp and cannabis, I should say. Then, of course, the rest of the world will follow suit. Can this be a realistic solution that we could help save the planet by legalizing hemp?
Well, I certainly believe so, and that's what I've been working to make a reality for a long time. And it's a big project. We've seen some astounding breakthroughs in this past year in Colorado and Washington. It remains to be seen what the federal government's going to do. If they don't oppose these laws in Washington and Colorado, I think that it's going to be a whole new world in terms of the ability to restore our planet using hemp. But I certainly believe that's true, and that's why I've been working for it for all these decades.
Now, first of all, I should congratulate you. We should all actually not just congratulate you, but actually thank you profusely for working tirelessly for all these decades to actually educate the masses and turn these stems, because, of course, this is now just becoming popular, but you've been doing this before it was popular when, of course, you were standing for the right for the right cause, despite the fact that most people were completely opposed to it. But anyhow, I just wanted to also mention that, of course, recently in Colorado, they started signing the first hemp farmers authorizations. So can you share a little bit about what's going on now? So there's actually farmers that are being permitted now. They're getting their permits to grow hemp. Do you have any insights to share about what's going on there?
Well, in Washington, they're going to take a year before they come up. Both Washington and Colorado are developing rules regarding hemp, and their laws are going to require that hemp is being cultivated using low THC varieties. However, it's the beginning, and the fact that they're able to produce some products with hemp just kind of opens the floodgates. And by regulating the marijuana market, I think the laws in Washington and Colorado are pretty restrictive. They're quite a bit different. Lots being left to the legislature and hasn't been determined yet. But both of those laws allow the industrial cultivation of hemp. And as long as it's limited to that low THC variety, they're going to have to figure out a way that the DEA is going to allow that variety seed stock from France to be imported. Now, if the federal government backs off under the Obama administration, as many of us hope they will, then we could see the growth in that industry the same way they have it in Canada and Europe. But it remains to be seen. So far, the DEA has opposed it. And in fact, they're the ones that are put in charge of both hemp and marijuana and all forms of cannabis. And they haven't allowed research on it for medical purposes, and they aren't going to allow industrial hemp unless the Obama administration makes them do it.
Well, let's hope that they get strong-armed into allowing it. But I got a quick question for you. Of course, based on everything that you've mentioned, the question just surfaces in my mind that just needs to be asked. If, of course, there's a lot of disadvantages, as you were alluding to, the use of these these varieties of hemp that are lower in THC and, of course, have other undesirable characteristics. Now, if that's what the farmers are going to be growing initially, of course, as you pointed out, it is a step in the right direction. So this is a good sign of the changing times. However, is it possible that farmers might be dissatisfied with the results of this crop because, of course, they might not be getting as much oil as you were mentioning here that the fuel?
Well, I think when the knowledge gets out there, they're going to demand the ability to grow the varieties that produce the most oil, the most fiber, the best quality and quantity of protein, oil, and fiber. And once it's allowed, it's just a matter of time before the truth comes out.
Okay, well, let's definitely hope so, and let's hope that these wheels of change happen rather quickly. So far we've, of course, been talking a lot about the fuel. Just to recap, you've, of course, definitely stated the fact that hemp is a viable alternative energy source for us to be using, as opposed to, of course, fossil fuels. We can, of course, use it for producing so many plastics and so many other products. Of course, cars have been built with it. Of course, the fiber, the fiber is outstanding in so many respects. It can be producing superior paper products. Of course, you can build houses. You can even build cars like Henry Ford did. There's just so many uses for that. But now there's also the food topic. Now, of course, we did touch upon that a little bit as well. But there's, of course, a large problem with world hunger. And, of course, you did mention that the hemp seed is, of course, the world's most nutritious seed. It's got the perfect blend of amino acids and, of course, the protein for the human body. Can this also help to solve the world hunger problems?
Well, right. If we're wiping out the use of petroleum, if we're resolving our energy issues with biofuel made from hemp, the byproduct is food. For every barrel of oil, every 50-gallon drum of oil you get from hemp seed, and you'll get about 6 or 7 of those barrels per acre, you're going to get 1,000 pounds of high-protein hemp seed meal. So by using hemp for fuel, we'll wipe out world hunger and provide a lot healthier source of protein for people.
And is it delicious? How does it taste?
Oh, it tastes great. It tastes, it can, it tastes, if you eat it hulled, and you can buy it at Whole Foods, and other grocery stores. But it tastes like a cross between pine nuts and cashews. Has a kind of nutty flavor. There's the hulled variety that has the outer crunchy shell taken off. There's the very crunchy variety that's just the natural toasted hemp seeds. I prefer it dehulled with the outer crunchy shell taken off. And, just as they can make soy protein into all kinds of different meat alternative products, they could use hemp to do that, only it'd be healthier than soy.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I do eat a lot of hemp seeds as well. And of course, as you mentioned, I eat the dehulled ones. Of course, it's available here in Canada. You can even buy it at Costco. But of course, at various health food stores, they even have toasted garlic salted varieties you can just sprinkle on salads. It's absolutely delicious. Of course, high in fiber as well. There's so many benefits that can be, of course, said, and high in omega-3s and Dr. Melamed, of course, talks about why omega-3s are so valuable for our bodies because, of course, it's a precursor for creating endocannabinoids as well, and there's a lot of benefits to that. So, of course, just make sure to listen to what Dr. Melamed has to say about that as well. For our listeners, I'm speaking not to you, Paul. I'm sure you already know that. But so, of course, as if you've mentioned, it is extremely nutritious, but of course this can actually solve our world hunger problems as well. And of course this, I would imagine, grow in a lot of places that other crops or traditional crops that we grow would fail. So could, for example, in the regions that are experiencing starvation, is hemp something that they could grow there under the conditions?
There's a drought in the Midwestern United States last year. And one of the things I heard from people in Nebraska's Fish and Wildlife people tell the local police not to harvest the wild feral hemp so that the sparrows and the birds have a food source in the winter. Anyway, in this drought last year, everything was brown but the hemp because the deep tap root of hemp was able to reach groundwater. It goes down, the tap root of hemp goes as deep as the plant is tall. So if you've got a 15, 20-foot tall cannabis plant, its tap root's going down 15 to 20 feet, so it can reach water tables that are unavailable to other plants. Then I've also seen hemp growing in swamps where it was growing in a foot of standing water in China as well. So it's very resistant and will grow from the subarctic to the tropics. It grows in every climatic zone. In fact, it's indigenous. It originally came from high up in the Himalayas in present-day Tibet and Kashmir and Afghanistan. And in that area, at high altitude, it still dominates the canopy, the mountaintops of those Himalayan peaks.
So it can grow just about everywhere. Of course, it's been said it's a weed, so it literally doesn't even need to be tended. As, of course, we alluded to earlier, you don't need to fertilize it because, of course, with its deep tap roots, not only is it accessing water, but it's also drawing up nutrients from deep within the soil, so it's not depleting the soil like other crops would. And we don't need to pesticides. Like, can you mention one of the benefits of not needing pesticides? Because of course that's destroying and polluting our soils as well. Do you have a few words about cannabis and pesticides?
Sure. Well, cannabis is particularly pest resistant. In fact, some of the resins in cannabis are natural insecticides, and it grows so quickly they don't have to use herbicides to stop weeds and other things because it shades them and they can't grow. In fact, there's this movie that the United States Department of Agriculture produced back in 1942. It's called Hemp for Victory.
You still there, Paul? I'm sorry, you just broke up there a little bit, Paul. Are you still there? Hello, Paul? I'm going to give you a call
Hello,
right back.
I still have a pretty strong signal.
Oh, okay, I can hear you now. Sorry, you were
okay.
talking about hemp for victory, and then your voice just sort of broke up and faded out.
Uh-oh.
So.
Sorry about that. I could hear you, but anyway, a little scene in that Hemp for Victory shows that it wipes out other weeds without the use of herbicides. They pull one weed out that's all dried up and dead, and they say, "See, it's dead as a dodo." So that's how effectively it can be used to clear fields from weeds for the next crop rotation.
Well, that's amazing. Now, of course, another clearing factor that cannabis has, not only for weeds, but of course, now there's a lot of talk about the fact that cannabis also absorbs a lot of the toxins and the heavy metals from the soil, and of course, it's utilized to clear up the areas where there's even been radioactive spills and nuclear reactor accidents. Can you just share a bit about the benefits of using hemp to help clean our environment as well?
Well, you said it very well. It leaches the toxic metals, uranium, and other things out of the soil to cleans the soil and brings up subsoil nutrients and makes them available in the next crop rotation. So It does it in both of those ways.
And, of course, we're talking about clearing the soil, but, of course, clearing the air. Now, of course, it's a well-known fact that all plants, of course, inspire the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere in order to synthesize the sugars and of course, grow. But, of course, if we're using hemp for producing fuel rather than releasing carbon dioxide, which has been pulled out from the wells underground and releasing that into the atmosphere, of course, we're going to be at least carbon neutral. But can you just say about any insights about how valuable it is as to drawing in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to help lower our already climbing carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere? Of course, that's a number of people are now aware that that's actually a growing problem as well. Can hemp be a part of the solution in that respect?
Well, certainly using it to make biofuels is carbon neutral. And so not all of it that is made into oil is used as a fuel. A lot of it will go into food or plastic products that aren't going to be burned and put directly into the atmosphere, and it will lower the need for these other fuel sources that, and therefore slow global warming.
Mm-hmm.
But also, if you make building materials out of hemp fiber, that is a carbon negative material, hempcrete, which is what the first concrete products were made with. It's basically hemp and quicklime or limestone, and it just dries out, and that can be made into housing products that are carbon negative, that take carbon out of the atmosphere and put it into products that aren't going to break down and go back into the atmosphere.
And, of course, that's, using products that's not cutting down virgin lands or trees in order to do that. Now, so here's a quick question. Of course, I think I already know the answer, but of course, I really want for people to really register this in their minds. So, of course, we're talking about the fact that hemp can be a viable alternative energy, and we could, of course, be using hemp for all these other purposes, such as making plastic, building materials, and so many other things as well that would create a net deficit or a carbon negative effect. So, if we were to abruptly stop the use of fossil fuels, and of course spewing the toxic gases and of course carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and if we were to be utilizing hemp not only for our fuel requirements, but of course having all the negative carbon negative effect as well for using it in building materials, is it possible that we can literally reverse what we've been doing over the past number of decades, over the past 100 years? Could we, over the next 100 years, essentially have a reversal effect? Is that a plausible potential scenario that could happen if we do that, where we'd stop using fossil fuels and go straight to hemp?
I certainly think so. it's hard to say for certain whether we can completely reverse what's happened in terms of pumping, so many petrochemical carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide in the atmosphere from burning fossil fuels, but it certainly is possible, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, Paul, I'm just going to do a little bit of an abrupt topic shift here. Of course, we've been talking a lot about the fuel, the fiber, and even the food. We touched a little bit about the medicine as well. But, of course, earlier in the call, we agreed that there's so many issues that, of course, hemp could help solve. And, of course, right now we've also been discussing about the environmental impact by switching over to a hemp-based industrial nation. Now, of course, there's other issues as well. For example, there's the topic of jobs. There's the topic of crime. There's the topics of the economy. How can hemp help those things? How is hemp a solution for those types of political issues as well?
It's such a huge issue. There's the whole criminal justice issue, the fact that taxing and regulating marijuana will produce revenue and stop the misuse of prison resources for people who don't belong there, marijuana users, growers, and sellers. But the issue of replacing the petrochemical industry with the biofuel industry, putting that wealth in the hands of the farmers of the earth instead of the capitalists of the earth, that's going to just change the whole economic paradigm. And, it would solve all sorts of social and economic justice issues. And that could happen very, very quickly once we quit using petroleum and start using hemp oil and biofuel instead.
Mm-hmm. And how fast could that happen? Let's just say, hypothetically speaking, that Obama today turned around and said, you know what, guys, this is all crazy. Let's just legalize all forms of cannabis, and you guys can do whatever you want to do, and then the farmers go nuts. How quickly could we actually...
I think by 2020 or 2025, we could change the whole energy system and put, a lot of these petrochemical companies out of business if we can just legalize marijuana and let farmers start growing hemp again without regard to its THC content, but instead paying attention to the ones that produce the most seed and the most fiber. And so if it produces the most seeds for oil and protein and the most fiber, that should be the criteria that farmers will grow hemp for. It shouldn't matter what its THC content is. THC should be cheap and plentiful. It grows on trees, and the price is just artificially inflated by prohibition.
Absolutely. And, of course, I know in a lot of parts of the world, but particularly in America, right now, jobs, the economy, if hemp was legalized, how would that affect, of course, I know that this is the World Summit, but you, I'm sure, are more familiar with your domestic economy. How would hemp legalization affect jobs in America?
Well, we're seeing an enormous boom in California and Colorado with commercialization just of the marijuana market. We'll see less use of prison resources. Those resources can go into education and research and development. It would just change the whole economic paradigm again. I have to keep coming back to that, but it's just a matter of legalizing marijuana and allowing hemp to be cultivated for its best attributes, and that will change the whole paradigm in short order, I believe. I really think that we will see it happen starting in 2015 and then reaching a groundswell by 2020, and by 2025 and 2030 it will change the whole paradigm.
Okay, now
we
need
using that
some
to happen.
very specific...
If that doesn't happen, we continue to use fossil fuels for energy, and we continue to cut down the world's forest for building materials and paper, then it's really an issue of freedom and liberty and the right to consciousness, the right for people to use marijuana because it makes them happy and feel good. And with the advent of new technology, whether it is biotech and genetic science, or nanotechnology, the shrinking of machines to microscopic levels, or artificial intelligence with the rise of computers and that. And as those technologies merge, if we don't allow hemp to decentralize wealth, decentralize power, and realize that this is a beneficial plan and they can't lie about it anymore, then the future of liberty is dire, and the dystopian possibilities are endless. So we really need to legalize marijuana so that I look at it as a bellwether for the future of freedom. If we don't legalize marijuana, they're able to continue this lie, then things like, horrible science fiction things with the the convergence of artificial intelligence with nanotechnology become more and more possible. We have to make natural individuals, people, have more rights than corporations and artificial individuals, and in the future, artificial intelligence. And marijuana is a bellwether issue in this fight for freedom.
Absolutely. And there's, of course, just for what it's worth, just for all our listeners, there's a lot of other topics, and there's literally thousands of topics that we could have easily touched upon, and specifics as well, of how cannabis would help various different types of political, social, environmental, economic issues. Of course, we're just literally scratching the surface here. But I think that people, just from listening to our conversation, Paul, I hope that you'd agree that people should at least start to realize that what we're talking about is we're actually providing a very real, a viable solution for a lot of the problems that we are facing in the world today. And that people should be researching this more, looking more into this, looking at the facts, and they should be demanding that our politicians legalize cannabis because of the tremendous implications that this has in so many different ways. Am I wrong here, Paul, or is this what people ought to be?
No, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. That's what I've been working to educate others about for all these years, because I've discovered it myself. And it's really it's hard for people to understand how varied this issue is and how it affects so many different issues, from the environment and deforestation to the economy and energy and building materials and paper and justice and prisons. It's just a lot, and health. The benefits of cannabinoids and to fight inflammation and provide an antioxidant to stop cancer. It's really a miracle plant. And I have to agree with many of my friends like Chris Bennett in Vancouver, BC, and Roger Christie out in Hawaii that, if any plant is sacred, if any plant is the tree of life, then marijuana must be it.
Absolutely. There's so much that can also be said in so many respects, but of course you touched upon the health aspect. Now, I wasn't really planning on getting into this discussion with you for this interview because, of course, there's also Rick Simpson who talks about that primarily more on the cancer side of things. But just so that, of course...
Well, I run these clinics, so I work with doctors and help patients get medical marijuana all over the United States. And so I've seen tens of thousands of patients, 160,000 patients that have benefited from the use of marijuana. I've seen blind people who regain their sight because of the use of marijuana, because it reversed the effects of multiple sclerosis. I've seen cancer patients who were going to die, who, according to all the other doctors, who fought off fourth stage metastatic aggressive cancer. And so I've seen a lot of patients that have used it as they were passing away, and it improved the quality of their life through hospice care and in the last stages of life. And, it's a neuroprotectant. It can protect the brain from neurodegenerative diseases and trauma. And so it's really a miracle drug. And not only is it a medicine for people, a friend of mine, John Trudell, a Native American activist here in the United States that started the American Indian Movement, or AIM, or AIM, as you call them up in Canada, the First Nations. He says hemp is earth medicine, and he's working to, along with me and Willie Nelson and Robert Redford, to publicize hemp's ability to be used for fuel, fiber, and food.
Absolutely. Now, let me just ask you this, because since we're talking about so many important topics on this call, and by the way, my intention is for your interview to be on actually day one of the summit, so that people actually get a chance to actually hear everything that you've said and really frame their minds about the importance of hemp, or cannabis rather, all forms of hemp. Well, actually, it's all the same plant, I should say. But of course, talking about the medicinal aspect, you have touched on, of course, the fact that there's a lot of ailments that cannabis can help. And, of course, we've talked about these serious ailments. But a lot of people can also benefit from cannabis for these common aches and pains and trivial ailments that they also have. I just want to bring this back to being the people's medicine, so that people realize that this isn't just something for somebody who's really sick, somebody else. Most of us experience little aches and pains, arthritic issues, maybe just muscle, or even or sore backs,
or even depression,
other insomnia.
You just want to feel good, or you want to enhance a social experience with your friends or family. It can improve our quality of life in almost every aspect of cannabis's multiple offerings.
So this can really help the people. Of course, you mentioned the First Nations fellow from AIM, that this is the medicine of
John
the earth.
Trudell.
John Trudell, thank you very much. And of course, this can benefit all people. So from, of course, serious elements, of course, I understand it can even help with plantar's warts, cold sores, little minor trivial issues as well. So I just want people to realize.
I have a collection of antique medical marijuana bottles and containers. Johnson & Johnson used it in a number of different topical things for skin problems. They'd mix it with aspirin, so you could get a topical preparation of cannabis and aspirin to put on eczema or rashes or burns. And so it can be, it was used for migraines. It was used to help people get off opiates and heroin and chloroform and cocaine. It can help people kick these other much more dangerous drugs.
It's known as a gateway back drug for those properties.
Yeah, exactly. But these antique medical containers from Park Davis and Eli Lilly, from pharmaceutical companies that are still in existence today, like Johnson & Johnson, they specifically said it was to help people quit opiates and chloroform and cocaine, and for alcoholics undergoing delirium tremens. So it's traditionally been used to help people with serious drug problems get off of serious drugs.
And, of course, now people are concerned about it being a drug, but the truth of the matter is it's not addictive. It's not in the classic way that any of these other substances that you've just mentioned. And, of course...
it's an anti-inflammatory, so it'll slow aging, and an antioxidant, a potent antioxidant, so it'll stop and help fight cancer. So it's really a miracle drug and a miracle plant.
And even Dr. Melamede is also suggesting that we should also be consuming it in lower doses, just to supplement our endocannabinoid systems for all the benefits that it offers as well. And it's just absolutely astounding that, of course, this marvelous plant that has so many beneficial uses industrially, agriculturally, medicinally, recreationally. I mean, just about every aspect that we can think of, there's benefits. I can't really think of anything negative to say about it, and yet it's been so demonized, villainized. It's absolutely atrocious how it's been slandered with all the propaganda, and of course it all comes down to the fact that there's been corporate interests who would like to suppress this information and suppress this plant because they can profit from it being prohibited. So I think that people really need to really understand, especially what was just said, that we've been lied to. And, of course, everything all along has been lies. And, of course, they've been ridiculous. And then, of course, as people realize it's been ridiculous, it's been replaced with other things. Just looking at the history, as you yourself, Paul, have mentioned, that if people were told that it's going to be cannabis sativa or indica to be prohibited, they would say no way. Doctors, of course, were fighting Congress because when Congress wanted to take away the rights for doctors to prescribe cannabis, they were in uproar, outraged by all this. And of course, initially, the very first negative statements about it were, of course, the fact that this, and I apologize, this is not meant to offend anybody, but this is actually just a historical reference here. That what was the very first thing that was actually said negative about it was that it caused white women to sleep with Negroes, and of course, the devil's music. I can't remember the exact quote just off the top of my head. And again, I do not mean to offend anybody by that statement, but of course, that's been just so ridiculous. So they had to come up with new propaganda. Then, of course, you had the reefer madness, which, of course, said that it becomes, it makes you murderous and just go out of your mind insane, which, of course, people realized wasn't true. So they had to come up with new propaganda. And, of course, that it causes brain damage, it kills brain cells. And, of course, Paul, can you just enlighten people about I'm sure you must be aware about the study, how they came up with the fact that it damaged the brain.
They asphyxiated rhesus monkeys. They gave them the equivalent of 500 joints in 15 minutes, and so they asphyxiated them. There was no oxygen in the smoke. They forced these monkeys to breathe, and therefore they died for lack of oxygen, but they said that caused brain damage.
And so, of course, they've been demanding that those studies have been be released for many years until finally the government gave in and gave the information of how those studies are produced. And, of course, it's just unbelievable that they were publicizing that it causes brain damage because, of course, you can burn anything. You can burn lettuce leaves, assuming it was dry, and, of course, asphyxiate monkeys with the same thing. It has nothing to do with cannabis. It's just they're dying from lack of oxygen. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But, of course, they were coming up with more lies. So right now, I think bottom line is that they're at the end of the stream of lies, because what else can they tell us, Paul? Like, seriously, right now we have the information. We have the Internet. We have the ways to communicate the truth about it.
It's bad for kids. That's what they keep saying. Oh, it sends the wrong signal to kids. Well, I think telling kids that marijuana is more dangerous than alcohol sends the wrong message to kids as well. We have to tell the truth about marijuana, and lying to kids isn't going to make it safer for them. So that's the thing we keep hearing from them, is their means to stop marijuana legalization is it will send the wrong message to kids. Well, marijuana prohibition has sent the wrong message to kids. Regulating it and restoring hemp for fuel, fiber, and food will send the right message. Well, just for what it's worth, I'd just like to just reframe that statement. Of course, do it for the kids, or think of the children. Well, yes, people, think of the children. Think about the future of the planet that we're going to be leaving for our children and our grandchildren to inherit. Think about the medicine that we're preventing them from having. They're suffering as a result of it. And there's just, think about, what is it, something like 20,000 children are dying a day from starvation. Think of the children. We ought to be legalizing it. We ought to be demanding this ASAP, not just these slow processes that's been happening. We need to expedite this process, and I think that the more people realize the truth of what cannabis can do for us, the planet, our health, our social, political systems, we need to wake up and start embracing this miraculous plant. And sorry for going on a bit of a soapbox there, Paul, but just is a message I really, really want for people to understand, and I'm sure you're in total agreement here as well. Oh yeah, very much so. I'm glad to hear you stating that, Bob.
Well, thank you so very much. Are there any other topics that, of course, I know that we can literally go down each of these threads and we talk for hours about specifics. Of course, we can't really do that today. But are there any particular topics that perhaps I omitted, or something that you really feel that we should also make sure that people are aware of as well today?
No, I think we've covered most everything. You know, the thing I like to leave in retrospect is something I said earlier, and, you know, it's the oldest crop. It's all archaeologists agree it's among the first crops purposely cultivated by human beings, and could well be the very first, at least 12,000 years ago, maybe 30,000 years ago. And it's the most productive crop, the crop that produces more fuel from its seed oil and biomass, more fiber from its stalks and stems, more food from its seeds and leaves, and more fiber and more medicine from the leaves and flowers than any other plant on the planet. So to prohibit the most productive and oldest crop known to man for the benefit of the few is evil. And so that's why we're working to restore hemp to its rightful place in our economy.
You know what? I respect you tremendously for all the work that you've done. Of course, you've just briefly touched at the start of the call that you've worked with Jack Hare, so many other people that you've been working with in so many ways. Of course, you've been doing this important work for decades. When, of course, this wasn't popular back then. Of course, you were sort of, I'm sure, in many respects, alone. And yet you were standing up for what you believed in was right. And, of course, now it's beginning to gain popularity. And, Paul, I just want to thank you for everything that you have been doing, because, of course, that you've been instrumental in bringing us to where we are today. And I thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart, and from everybody listening. I'm sure they feel the same, or at least ought to feel the same, thanking you for all the work that you're continuing to do to help liberate this incredible plant for all of us. And so thank you so very much, Paul.
You're most welcome. It's an honor. I couldn't think of anything I would rather do. As I've often said, wild horses couldn't drag me away, and a few have tried. So I plan to keep at it. I think persistence is the key quality for success.
Well, thank you, Paul. And, of course, for everybody listening, hemp.org. That's HEMP.org. Of course, Paul, you mentioned that that is the portal that will link to all your other websites, resources, your TV shows online, everything that people can learn more about hemp, and everything that we've pretty much discussed. They can discover more about these topics and go down the rabbit hole of learning more. Is that true?
That is exactly right, Bobby. That's the place, hemp.org.
Fantastic. So I encourage everybody to go click on that link, to go to hemp.org right now to learn even more and find out what this plant can do. And so once again, Mr. Paul Stanford, thank you so very much for doing this call and for sharing this absolutely vital information with the Cannabis World Summit.
You're very welcome, sir. You have a good evening.